So recording is up. Hi and welcome everybody for SUSE QE Tools team workshop. Happy to see somebody joining today. Today we will have, after 2 months as usual, the SUSE QE Tools roadmap presentation. So what I would like to do with you is walk over what we have done in the last 2 months. We had the roadmap presentation on the start of May, so like 2 months period that we want to cover here, and then talk about what is currently in the making, and then afterwards we can talk about the outlook, what will come after that. So let's start with what had been worked on. That's this query, closed within last 60 days. It's a publicly accessible query, so you can also follow with that. I would say we are meeting the usual velocity in counting our work in the tickets that we have. Within the last 60 days, we have roughly 140 tickets resolved. So, as usual, per calendar day, we can expect a little bit more than 2 tickets resolved, and that worked out. Let's start with a more open QA feature request. So we had observed over years actually problems with the scalability related to the web proxy that we use, that is Apache. And we wanted to try out Nginx as an alternative. And we tried that first out, let's say, in a development setup. And then we felt confident enough that we can use Nginx on one of the production instances that we maintain, which is in one of the cases is O3, so that's OpenQA OpenSUSE.org. And we did that, I would say, with very good success. So what's the difference? I hope nothing that's noticeable. So if you follow that link, then yeah, just the very same as usual. There's a transparent proxying going on over that. It's actually over 2 proxies in case of yes, so-called Hydra instance. That also takes your SSL connection, and then from that on, it's proxied to now Nginx on a virtual machine, and within that virtual machine Nginx, and then from Nginx to the actual web UI instance. It's actually not that much necessary to have Nginx on O3 due to the additional proxy already there. And as you can see, the ticket, it actually says high response times on OSD. So, we just tried it out on O3, but the next step after that would be that we, let's say, improve our testing and our support for Nginx, and then in the subsequent step, also roll it out on OpenQA SUSE DE, the SUSE internal instance, which is also bigger and which is the one which suffered more from the performance limitation. So that's something that we plan to do within the next weeks of OSD. Well, we observed or some problems were observed also over longer time, that you might sometimes see incomplete jobs with cache service full, which happens in particular something like Monday morning on OpenQA OpenSUSE.org, when after our Sunday automatic maintenance window where we reboot machines and the cache is empty on the workers, and then a new tumbleweed snapshot is arriving for testing, and then suddenly there's a big workload of testing, and some workers are, reporting back that they're overwhelmed. I mean, eventually they catch up with that, but it's actually it can still happen that sometimes you use incomplete jobs with that message, and we improved the restarting of jobs, in particular in relation to multi-machine. We are running OpenQA to test OpenQA itself. We are using a test distribution there. That's OpenQA in OpenQA. And we realized that, well, what we do there is actually we set up an OpenQA instance, which is checking out also instance through OpenSUSE, the main OpenSUSE and SLE testing instance. And that is becoming very, very big, in particular, with the size of all the needles. So doing that setup from scratch in a virtual machine over and over again can take rather long. When I say rather long, it's like 40 minutes. Okay, and we wanted to reduce that runtime. One more reason why we wanted to reduce that runtime for us is because we also want to run those tests as a showcase whenever there's any pull requests to the test system. So that's why we are now using a smaller example distribution when we trigger those tests, but still on a nightly basis, we trigger tests with the full. And then important news, we improved our default use of video encoders in OpenQA. As you might know, OpenQA is able to record videos. So what was done there, and I also did a specific workshop topic about that, is that we re-evaluated the state of the AV1 video codec in particular, which is very awesome, very performant, and very efficient, but still a bit, maybe a bit new royalty-free video codec. So we evaluated that. This is why it says second attempt, because after 3 or 4 years we already did that, and at this time some years ago we said okay, we are not ready yet to really roll it out, because in all the operating systems and also in hardware and in browser support for the users, it's not there yet, but now it is. So what we do now by default, if there is FFmpeg available supporting AV1, like in a sufficiently high new version, like on a recent Tumbleweed installation, then AV1 is used as a default. If that version is not available, then it's actually falling back to BP9, which is also quite nearly comparable for our use cases. Video compression, also royalty free. And if all that is not available, then we fall back internally to the OGV video encoding, which is still used. And on top of all that, you can also configure an external video encoder if you're setting up a worker, so depending on what's rolled out there, what's available there. Yep. So what else? Let's take a look. We are looking into OpenQA in SLE plus package up, properly supported. We have OpenQA in SLE plus package up, but the difference here is that we want to streamline the current work. And for that, we did solution, a time-boxed evaluation of how feasible is that to do, what specific tasks do we need to do, so that in the end we have that in an automatic submission pipeline, and we identified those tasks and we will follow up with that, which is also related to one of the more recent sagas that we added to our backlog about OpenQA for SUSE customers. And we extended OpenQA Investigate to identify reproducible product issues. There's also a specific workshop topic planned about that one, just a small teaser. I can show you here. So for any unreviewed new failure on OpenQA, if this is configured with the according hook scripts, which we do have for OpenQA SUSE.org and OpenQA SUSE.de, you can see that EcoTest, which is a bot user, automatically triggers those investigation jobs. Those investigation jobs answer you the questions that people often have, like, is it reproducible if you just retry? What happens if I go back to the state of the last goods test? Does it work there? Because, maybe it's a test regression. What happens if we go back to the last good build? And what happens if we choose to, revert both those parameters? And you can see the results of the according investigation jobs here in this bubble icon. And then also, what is also done is that we have those additional follow-up comments. So if those jobs are finished, then we already had in the past in the evaluation, like based on a retry job, is it a sporadic failure? Like, if you retry and then it passes, well, you can consider that a sporadic failure, but we don't know exactly what the reason was. But if it's failing reproducible, then we can also take a further look into the other jobs, and then we can arrive to a conclusion. And this one is stated here. Jobs including the last good build are okay. So we are likely having a product issue. So what OpenK can do, it's automatically finding out that based on the combination of those test results, what you see here as a test failure is very likely a product issue. So why is it not definitive? Why can we not be absolutely sure? Well, it could still be that the result of those 4 jobs is, let's say, an unfortunate combination of sporadic failures. So it just happened that the last good test failed and the retry failed, but the one including the last good build actually passed, even though maybe the issue is elsewhere. Or, the moon phase. It's so I wanted to provide you that teaser because I'm myself very excited about that feature, and I think it can save a lot of time for anyone reviewing OpenK test cases. Definitely, I suggest you use that feature. If you have any feedback, then please bring it forward to us. I would be very happy to hear about that. As I said, we have specific workshop topics planned for that, and also we have some follow-up work planned for that, in particular to clearly identify test regression. So that we would have a message which stating then exactly if we have a product issue, and then in the future when there's a clear test regression. And depending on those, of course, there's a potential to go even further and say, like, if we are sure that this is a product issue, then maybe suggest to report a bug, maybe automatically report a bug. If we know that it's a test regression, then maybe automatically report an according issue in the other issue track about test issue. If we clearly identify that it's neither test regression nor product regression, but something in the infrastructure, then report an issue about that to the according administrator. Okay, well, what else? Then, yeah, there are some minor things. For example, what we did is an all-in-one OpenK container solution. So also a quick outlook on that one. Or actually, I can just reference to the OpenK documentation. So what we have there is an oh wait, how's it? I hope to find it. Yep, there we go. So if you just come from the top, OpenK installation guide, what we think is the easiest and quickest way to spawn a single instance of OpenK with a single command is just that. So you have a single line, which then, it opens ports, and then what you have is on the host where you spawn that, you have an OpenK instance which is ready for work directly. So you have a web UI which can display the results, including the scheduler and including a worker. So you can right away schedule tests. Of course, that can all be tweaked, and already from in before we had separate web UI and worker containers if you want to split it out over multiple machines. If you want to provide a custom configuration, then this is all possible. And if you want to run the OpenQA client, then this is also also an Outlook there. So we plan to have a separate workshop, multiple separate workshop topics about OpenQA containers, so that we will play around a bit more, demo that. Mm. We sorry about that. We have this saga about running OpenQA for SUSE customers, which can be either on a pure SLE base or with a future coming on an ALP base. What we did there as an initial investigation is OpenQA container in ALP, which was actually very straightforward. There was like, okay, there's a certain ALP container base, and can we build an OpenQA container based on ALP? And the result is basically, yes, we can do that. So, we will decide if we want to change our container base from what we currently use, which is a pure OpenSUSE tumbleweed, maybe to a different, that's certainly. And then OpenQA tests and pull requests to GitHub audience distri OpenQA. So what this one is telling us that what one can do is in a test distribution, like on GitHub. What we can do is we can integrate OpenQA directly. Let me show you live examples of that. So whenever you create a pull request to this test distribution, and this is the test distribution which we solely maintain, and then the idea is then, of course, if we get a little bit more experience, then we will also suggest to include that in other test distributions, but you can also try to pick that up yourself already. So what we have there is scenario definitions where we prepare a schedule of OpenQA, which looks very similar, but it's not exactly the same to the job templates that you know from OpenQA job group. And we have GitHub workflows like OpenQA. And what this one is doing, it's setting up some credentials so that we can access an OpenQA instance, in that case, OpenQA OpenSUSE.org. And then we have trigger and monitor. So what this one is doing is using the OpenQA client container and then triggering and monitoring OpenQA tests. So it's running OpenQA CLI schedule. That's actually a new API route with according parameters and some, the usual settings like distri, arch, HED, build, and cstier. And what you will end up with is then visible, for example, in this dummy PR. That's dummy PR Asdil12 just created because, it's so simple to trigger OpenQA tests now doing changes in pull requests. So it says all checks have passed. That's 4 successful checks. That's actually multiple different things. And one of those is a GitHub action, which is called OpenQA. And if we follow in there, we already saw that the result was passed. If we follow in there, that you can see that this was running for 12 minutes, 30 seconds. So a bit of time. You can actually see the scheduled OpenQA jobs. They are scheduled, and then they are, we ask them for the status, scheduled, running, and eventually done. We can see all those results are done. If we follow those results on OpenQA, we can see that there's a specific build for that branch on that fork, and we can see a combination scheduled. So it's not just a single job, but multiple jobs. And yeah, Pavel, on.
I have a question, Oliver, or maybe an idea. First of all, this is very nice. I like it that you have this scenario defined in Git and then a job.
Yeah.
But can we use before you mentioned that you can run OpenQA I believe, including a worker in a container, right?
Yes, yes,
So can those two things be used together? So you define and you define a YAML with your jobs, and then you spawn a container which will then spawn an open QA, and it will run the jobs
absolutely.
you.
That's a very good idea. Thank you very much. So that's exactly the idea that um, because the complete schedule definition is in this YAML file. Let me show
Mm-hmm,
you again. And then you realize it includes the products definition, it includes the machine definition. And what it does here, the worker class Chemo x86 that's just a default, right?
mm-hmm,
So
yeah.
if we spawn that all in one container solution, it will provide that. And then from that, it's all the information that an OpenGL instance needs, because this is the schedule definition, and we will schedule tests which check out the test distribution over Git. So it's all there. The only um, thing that you can choose is like, okay, do you want to keep that OpenQA container running
Yeah.
like persistently or over a longer time, so that you have that convenient web UI to display the results. But actually, just for the execution, you could just spawn the container, take that, run it, and then destroy the container again, right?
Is this defining the job groups as well?
Yeah, yeah. So no, actually, it's
Temporary.
it's not using a job group.
Mhm.
So let me show you again the the OpenGate job.
The
Uh, yeah,
the intention I was thinking about, well, is that if you would run an OpenQA container and you would keep it,
yeah,
then it would be nice, and then you would choose, you would use this one YAML solution to schedule those jobs. It would be nice to, you can still see them in all tests, but you, yeah, it's not. I see. uh,
yeah. So
you know what I mean,
it,
maybe.
yeah, yeah. So this is a build,
Uh-huh.
but as you can see here, you cannot click up here because
Yeah.
it's not included in an existing job.
Mm-hmm.
If you
I
would
see.
have job groups that exist, then we can just put it into the job group with a scheduling parameter. So, not the usual way of calling ISO's post and then the job group decides which test it will pick up, but the other way around. That's certainly possible. So we could, from the outside, say that goes into this job group, which is, ID 90 or identified by the name. That's
Okay.
possible. But of course, if you're talking about a container that you just spawned, we don't have job groups yet. So maybe then in that case, yeah, there are still, I would say, two different ways what you can do. You can either have another document which defines the job groups and then have one API call to say initialize with those job groups.
Mm-hmm.
We might want to think about extending scenario definitions to create those job groups or ensure that those create. That's not the case right now, but it would be possible. Or the alternative would be that, when we call OpenGate CLI schedule, you could just have a small list of commands up front to create the
Yeah. Yeah.
according job. We don't need
Yeah. 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 I see. But it's still very interesting. Thank you.
Cool, thank you. Yeah. So there are other stories which relate to that. For example, research native GitHub for running OpenGate as CI checks. So we did that as a Spike solution first, and then we came up with that one, and then we saw that as a certain limitation. So we also created another related feature supporting fork-based development models, because at first we chose the way in GitHub workflows which only work like when you commit to another branch in the main repository. But of course, the usual is that you have your own fork and you create a pull request from that fork to the main repository. Now we found a way that also works. Then we found like, okay, we need to adapt an existing documentation section for the use of that and related to the containers. There are some best practices which we wanted to add to the Docker files that we use. That oh yeah, and also OpenGL clone custom git ref spec, because that is also involved. It was actually a user report, but it's also related to that whole story block. Now, to something different, there are a lot of infrastructure tasks. One interesting one is that there was actually a fork in the GitHub OpenSUSE organization of auth authenticity. We found that it looked abandoned. It was like the last commit was like from 2 years ago, but the official one is github.com auth authenticity OpenSUSE. So I asked the OpenSUSE owners of GitHub to delete that, to not cause any confusion, because it didn't include any valuable result. And then more infrastructure. So what's going on there? Well, within SUSE, let's see, for example, on the level of epics, there's a lot of going on. There's still some, already quite some time ago, years ago, the LSG QE department was created within SUSE, and that's from two former departments, QA and QAM. And in some cases, in particular for QAM machines, we found that they are not well maintained. It's like people have forgotten about those machines. They are not used anymore, maybe not usable because maybe something is broken. So what we did is we streamlined that. So one task was to ensure proper QE maintainership of the Nuremberg located QAM machine, which is also related as preparation work, as long as with updating and making sure that we have a current QA setup, to all the topics that will come up. So you can see a lot of things like decommissioning old machines. We need to move machines. We need to find an active inventory. And then there's new things coming up, like repurposing old machines for new ways. For example, now in the Franken campus office in the basement, there's a lab called FC Basement, short for Franken campus basement. And many people by now, you know that, working from home or have a hybrid worker setup. This is why the usual model of having a workstation behind the desk or below the desk is not that common anymore. So what we did is, or what we do, we provide more bare metal servers that can be used and can be reserved by people, same as virtual machines, which we also provide. And yeah, which is also including that ticket, and ADRP entries and monitoring and remote switchable power distribution units and some cabling and some problems that we find, and then we are losing access, and to fix the access again with either physical access or remote access, so that in the end remote control is possible. So all that and more in that direction. Let's see what else. Yeah, you can see just from the mention Leap 15.5, Leap 15.5, Leap 15.5. So Leap 15 SP5 was released along with Leap 15.5. That means that this is the most recent and current OpenSUSE Leap. And because we run all our infrastructure as much as possible on the common operating system, which is the last released Leap, this is why we are in the process of First, updating containers, OBS package builds, building dependencies, building packages, and then also migrating all the according machines to Leap 15.5. So some of the work had been done already, and some more is coming. Just a short glimpse about bugs and things that we needed to react on. So SUSE Summer 2023, yay, let's celebrate the summer. And what comes with summer? Of course, we have climate control outages. So we needed to handle those. Of course, the plan is that eventually Nuremberg 1 will be moved to other places. So this is why we have tasks like that, decide about all LSG Nuremberg 1. Means like, where should they go? Should they be decommissioned? Should they go to Nuremberg 2, which is Franken campus? Should they go to Nuremberg 3, which is a new data center in Nuremberg? Should they go to Prague office, which is Prague 1? Should they go to Prague 2, an external data center? Or should they go to Prague 2 extension, which is additional racks in Prague 2 location? So all that, along with the according, asking people like, hey, how do you know about that machine? Do we still need it? What can we do to migrate the services? Oh, we need to upgrade the operating system. Maybe we need hardware that should replace those machines for that. And what else? We actually had a significant outage of OpenK OpenSUSE.org just last week. Over the whole Sunday. So nobody was really reacting on that for a long time, which is understandable because it's Sunday. So most of you probably haven't realized. But still, I wanted to conduct a lessons learned meeting about that within the team. I think we did that with great success. So we identified some points where we can improve. That was actually related to the move from Apache 2 to Nginx, which I mentioned. What else? Yeah, some alert handling. I mean, that's just usual and needs to be expected. You can see here more all those mentions of Prague 2 and Nuremberg 3. So let's come to our overview of what we will work on. Yeah, Pavel.
Just a short question. Is Nginx now officially supported for OpenQA? Is it also documented and so on?
Yep. So very good point. You're a bit too quick. So let's answer that question right away. So if we take a look into our current backlog, we have 99 tickets. And one of the tasks which is in progress right now is that ensure both Nginx and Apache are properly covered in packages, testing, and documentation. So to answer your question, not quite yet, but expect that we can say, yes, Nginx is properly supported on the same level as Apache in some days and weeks from now, okay? In some cases, actually, we are already running Nginx for quite a long time, which is the load balancing Docker Compose setup. But to admit, I mean, we do get a lot of feedback from our own production instances. And in both those, we are not running the container-based solutions, and we are only since very recently running Nginx there. So if you want to, if you want to ask what's the more stable and more tested solution, obviously it is Apache. Yeah. Nginx definitely works for like small setups where you just spawn something and then it does start. How it does scale, like for the biggest instances possible, that we will be able to answer in some weeks. Okay. Yes, so in preparation for further migration of machines and being able to decide properly where physical machines should go or where we do need to migrate services to, we have multiple inventory related tasks. You can also see a lot of relations in here. One specific task that Liv Ivan is working on is to make sure that all SUSE QA machines are faulted. The subject is not mm, it, not exactly up to date, because what it effectively means is that we want to ensure that every production machine that we have within maintained by QE is using a proper kind of automatic management. That could be that it's done by Solve, which we maintain. It could be done that it's actually maintained by SUSE IT engineering infrastructure, probably with another Solve repository. It could be that there are other means to control those machines. For example, an OpenGA bare metal machine, of course, we will not directly control, because OpenGA controls it completely with the IPMI access. So then that mean would be indirectly covered. There was a problem in the network, not reachable. That was just yesterday, where there was a complete outage of the tunnel between Nuremberg 1 and Nuremberg 2, which it did have some impact on machines, which is still ongoing. So some machines struggle with that and then need special handling, and that brings us to ideas like, okay, what do we need to in monitoring and all those things. And one also very recent change here, and this is a kind of a fun story, is that we had one PowerPC Power 8 machine, which was running in Opal mode, meaning it's not running with Power VM, it's not connected to an HMC, but standalone, a bare metal OpenSUSE/SLE installation. It was working fine for many years. Then eventually we observed some problems. We conducted a firmware upgrade already 1.5 years ago, and then we didn't have remote access, and nobody really in the company helped us there. And now we do have a great contact from IBM directly, and they helped us a lot with really interesting approaches, how to approach the system administration and get access over some kind of a bit convoluted back channel, but in the end, that really helped. So we do now have access to the machine, which since then moved location twice already, and now it's Franken Campus Basement. And now it doesn't find any storage devices anymore. So that could be just another issue. Could be related to the physical migration, that now maybe a controller was unseated from the socket or anything. So I plan next week to actually physically go there, open up the case, and then check if I can reseat the controller card. How is that related to current work? Well, for OpenGA OpenSUSE.org, what we have is we do have a replacement for PowerPC testing, but again, it's just a single machine, because we added another machine and then just that one died shortly after. So a nice coincidence, but still we want to increase redundancy. And also, we within the tools team, PowerPC is still special for us, and it helps us to get some additional experience there, also in preparation for the migration of data centers. So it's also related to OSD, where PowerPC machines are currently in the process of being moved to the Prague 2 data center, from Nuremberg 1 to Prague 2, or Nuremberg 3 later on. And then we will need to set up part of the remote controlling framework. So, working on that helps us to gain experience. It also helps us to have redundancy from an unaffected location, which is Nuremberg 2, so that we hopefully can provide redundancy while other data centers are in the process. What else? What's in feedback? We have we have new workers. I mentioned FC Basement is currently unaffected by the move, which is good. So this means that any servers that we have there can help to provide additional redundancy while other locations can be affected, so that our plan is we would have a continuous service, at least for the most common OpenGA worker classes. And that's also related to um, uh, special hosts. As I said, the most common worker classes. So chemo will most certainly just work fine. Maybe you will reduce, you will see a little bit of elongated run times on some days because maybe there are less hosts for some time, but there are less common worker class for example, Zen testing. Because for Zen testing currently, right now, there's, as far as I know, there's only a single machine, which is in Nuremberg 1. And there's not really any good experience how to set that up. It could be very simple, but no one ever did it to provide more redundancy. So this is why the existing machine should be properly covered in our management structure. And then afterwards, we can deploy new machines also from Fun Campus Basement and other locations. Let's see, that's also related to, yeah, here support data center migration planning. So that's on me, like, sending meetings, coordinating with other affected teams. And yeah, I mentioned support move of PowerPC machines to Prague 2, also support move of S390 mainframe to Prague 2. So also that's in the works right now, that all those will move to the production data center. Use those 3 machines as a workstation replacement. You can see there's a lot of things going on regarding the move, and will certainly cover our time in many cases. What's workable, what's to come? Support migration of O3 VM to Prague 2. So that's one urgent task. That one will happen. So OpenGA OpenSUSE org, which is currently served from a virtual machine in Nuremberg 1, will move to Prague 2. So there's an virtualization cluster in Prague 2. And the actual migration date is the 19th of July. So I will write another announcement shortly before that. But we expect that on this day, OpenGA OpenSUSE org will not be available. And in the end of the day, that O3 will again be available. So this is for the virtual machine running the main web UI and the database, serving all the archive and the test results. And the workers, well, in theory, they could be distributed. In case of O3, we are a little bit more limited there because we need to have a proper DMZ setup. So a separate network zone. And that one is expected to come up beforehand, but maybe also afterwards on new hardware in Prague 2. After that, 2 weeks later, we do the same exercise again, but for OpenKA SUSE. So on the 1st of August, according to current plan, OpenKA SUSE will migrate. That means on this day, we expect that OpenKA SUSE will not be available. And again, you can expect in according channels another written announcement shortly beforehand. If we do it now, that's 1 month before, then you will forget. So, needs to be a bit more time. So let's be done with all the infrastructure work and talk about the other things. So, for example, I mentioned that we extended OpenGA Investigate to identify product issues. And this is the related follow-up task for the other angle, which is to identify reproducible test issues, so not product issues anymore, using OpenGA Investigate. Depending on, combination of the OpenGA Investigate jobs, we can find out if something is a product issue or a test issue, something different. So this is why we have this story. And what else? I said I wanted to not talk about that much infrastructure, but there's more infrastructure, like more workers here, more workers there, NFS mounts failing, additional redundancy, post-station testing. So yeah. So what does that mean for an overview from the top level? You can see that we have currently 4 sagas, which is a bit much, considering also that we have, like northern hemisphere summer vacation period coming up, so we expect a little bit of reduced um, capacity in the next months or in the next months. But still, what's currently as most urgent are two, let's say, SUSE infrastructure related sagas. One is the older one is actually the up to date and current QA setup in SUSE. That means that we are actually, I mean, what that means right now is that we're really ready for any migration to new data centers. And the actual migration is then this task, which says QE setup in Prague 2 and Nuremberg 3, meaning we need to plan, we need to know each machine, and then we need to make sure that we have the network set up with a firewall. We know how to, if we are talking about old machines running some relevant services, we know how to migrate those services to new machines in new data center location. If it's for still current machines, then we plan to move those machines in a physical move to other locations. And depending on, who's the owner, who's the contact person, what's the service, what's the state of the machine, different plans apply. If they should go to, Prague 2, Nuremberg 3, and the other according location. More development focused those two sagas. You can see from the number that this one is very old. Unfortunately, we neglected that for rather long, and I really wanted to push for that. So we want to have full version control awareness within OpenKA. That means user forks branches, fully version test schedules, and configuration settings. You have seen one important example today, combining two concepts, which is the scenario definitions in a YAML file in a Git distribution, so that you can spawn a fresh OpenKA setup and provide all the necessary configuration from the outside on the fly, as well as being able to run actual test definition from a Git repository, not only for, let's say, a master branch on a recurring schedule, but actually as CI checks before merge, so that in every pull request, you can run the same set of OpenKA tests or a subset of OpenKA tests and extend from there. And there's a lot of work that still needs to be done here, that can be done here. For example, now that we're running that as a showcase within one test distribution, we want to make you able to benefit from that within other test distributions, like was audience history OpenSUSE. And if you do that bigger test distribution, then there's more tasks coming up. Like, okay, for pull request, of course, you cannot run all the tests all the time. So you need to select a subset, how to control that subset, how to make people able to review change requests to that subset of a schedule, how to maintain the full schedule, which is, including subset plus more tests, how to see the differences, how to handle separate needle directory and show that in the web UI when the test had been running for a pull request which wasn't merged yet. All those questions. And then finally, the Saga OpenKA for SUSE customers. So that includes 2 story blocks. So we have epics for each of those. But I also mentioned in acceptance criteria that the goal is that we have OpenKA, which is WebUI plus Worker, which is continuously built, tested, and published on latest CLI and package up. We might change that so that in the end we are using something like Alp as wording, but let's say that's an implementation detail. And then we have Python-based OpenKA tests that are usable for testing new products. One could argue that this is already the case because for years we did have Python test support in the product, but we want to gather more experience with that and get rid of some rough edges and things like that. There is a third point, which is making the setup easier and more streamlined. So this is what you can see in the first epic mentioned here, easy OpenQA setup. So that includes things that were already done, like the all-in-one container setup, that single OpenQA Podman runline. But it also includes tasks that we want to do in the future, like a showcase how to run an OpenQA test in 5 minutes. It's actually also a workshop topic, which I've planned. But it also means that we want to streamline the documentation, maybe have a separate video, which is like really showing that, not a workshop recording, but proper instruction by video. Okay, so that's a complete overview. That's all I can present. Do you have any more questions or additions to any of those tasks, or something just missing? Maybe something that you see is redundant by now? Anything that's surprising to you? Next week workshop, Marita. What next? What do you mean workshop? Next, we had planned how to run OpenGate in 5 minutes.
Yeah, I just wanted to just remind everyone next week on the Alp QE workshop, right? Next week on Thursday and on Friday there is a workshop, and you will also present OpenQA in a container there, right?
Exactly. So on the, I mean, it's a SUSE internal event on Thursday and on Friday. I will present also that, and we will, try it out and demo that. And on Friday first, we will have the SUSE QE tools workshop for how to run OpenGate in 5 minutes with the all-in-one container. So it might be a bit of overlap there. And after that, at like immediately, like 5 minutes after the SUSE QE tools workshop, we will have the second part of the SUSE internal event QE out workshop with a hands-on session. Right. So
yeah, right. Just wanted to mention that here.
Yeah, thank you. That's very good, because it's really goes hand in hand here. Right. Yeah. So good that you mentioned that. So this was the SUSE QE tools roadmap presentation, and the next week we will run how to run OpenGate in 5 minutes. Related to that, at a later point, we will talk again about OpenGate containers. Here in particular, how to deploy, probably not the all-in-one container, but the other variants in more detail, how to use them, what are the limitations and the differences to package-based deployments, and the relation to Alp. So maybe also we can discuss a bit of follow-up here, what we find out in the Alp sessions next week. Okay. So cool. With that, thank you all for attending, and hope to see you again next time. Goodbye.